It's time now for our business update, and I'm joined here in the studio by Brian Quinn. The latest iPhones have just been released, and so far the response has been a little bit underwhelming.
Yeah, that's right. The iPhone 8 has just made its debut on Asian and Pacific markets today, and it seems Apple fans are less enthused than they've been for previous versions. Sydney, Australia normally sees hundreds of customers lining up at the Apple Store for the latest release, but the line for the iPhone 8 this time had just a few dozen. It would seem that plenty of Apple files are holding out for the top-of-the-line iPhone 10 or X, due to hit the market in November, but the iPhone 8 has seen lackluster reviews as well. Apple shares dropped to two-month lows on Thursday on those assessments, and even some of those who were waiting in line to get the phone were already disappointed.
It's not much of an upgrade. It's more of a, it shouldn't, in my opinion, it shouldn't have been called an 8, it should have been called a 7S. If they're going to put in such a lack of innovation like that, it should be called a 7S. It shouldn't be called an 8. That's like a disgrace to the name.
Turning now to North America, Brian, where negotiations over the NAFTA trade agreement are set to get underway this weekend.
That's right. Round 3 of talks to rework the North American Free Trade Agreement between the U.S., Canada, and Mexico get underway tomorrow in Ottawa. The U.S.'s chief negotiator says Washington will press for more American-made components going into foreign products made for export to the U.S. Canada, though, has threatened to walk away from talks altogether if the U.S. insists on playing hardball. Catherine Clifford reports.
The thorny issue being thrust onto the table by the US, rules of origin, limits on how much of a product's parts should originate from within North America, labour standards aimed at increasing Mexican wages, and at resolving spats over trade and investment. But this Friday, the US Commerce Secretary said they're out of date. In an opinion piece for the Washington Post, Wilbur Ross argued that since NAFTA's creation, the number of US-made parts and products, especially cars, assembled on its NAFTA partners' soil had significantly dropped. According to a new report commissioned by the Trump administration, in Canada this had fallen from 21% to 15%, and Mexico from 26% to 16% from 1995 to 2011. The Trump administration now says rules need toughening up to accommodate the decline, saying the US would enjoy a trade surplus with NAFTA partners if it weren't for the deficit in auto parts. Mexico has previously claimed its imports into the US contain about 40% US content. Speaking at the UN on Thursday, the Mexican foreign minister said progress was being made towards modernizing the agreement.
We assume this process with absolute seriousness. Mexico at all times will defend its legitimate national interest, with the conviction that it is possible to achieve a very positive result for the three nations.
Canada has threatened to walk away from talks altogether if the US takes too hard a line. But with 75% of Canadian exports going to the US, observers say that drastic step remains unlikely.
And Brian, how are the markets looking this morning?
The European index is opening lower, taking their cues from Asian markets, rattled by new geopolitical tensions as North Korea threatens to test a hydrogen bomb in the Pacific. London's FTSE 100 down 0.2%, similar for the Frankfurt DAX. CAC 40 here in Paris opening down 0.2 as well, but has since jumped into positive territory. Asian indexes in the red across the board. Credit rating agency S&P has downgraded China's sovereign credit rating. That weighed on Chinese markets. The Shanghai Composite off by nearly 0.25%. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index down nearly 0.75%. Similar for the Kospi in Seoul. Tokyo's Nikkei Index off by 0.25%. Well, let's take a look at some more of today's top business headlines. Boeing says Turkish Airlines plans to order 40 of its 787 Dreamliner airplanes. The deal would be valued at nearly $11 billion at current Boeing prices. It comes as Turkish Airlines looks to boost its fleet to meet demand for wide-body planes. Boeing says it plans to increase production of the Dreamliner jets to 14 per month in 2019. Baidu is launching a $1.5 billion fund to invest in self-driving vehicle technology. The Chinese search engine leader says its Apollo fund will invest in roughly 100 autonomous driving projects in the next 3 years. The move is part of a larger plan by Baidu to accelerate development in the sector to compete with American firms. And Hewlett-Packard Enterprise plans to cut at least 5,000 jobs. Bloomberg reporting that the company will reduce its global workforce of 50,000 by around 10% as it seeks to cut costs amid rising competition. The layoffs are expected to start before the year's end. HP's chief financial officer says the company is looking to save $1.5 billion over the next 3 years.
And Brian, finally from you, sports and gambling often do go together, but apparently not quite like this.
That's right, this is a different story here. Real Madrid star Cristiano Ronaldo has entered into a promotional arrangement with a firm selling highly risky financial products to retail investors. Ronaldo tweeted to his followers last month that he's partnered with Exness, that's a Cyprus-based online brokerage specializing in complex financial derivatives. Using Exness's services, small retail investors can make leveraged bets on currency and stock futures. The leveraged part of that means that they can bet with as much as 500 times the money that they actually have. And while that means gains can be higher, so can losses. Some studies report that small investors lose money over 80% of the time on such bets. European regulators are considering EU-wide rules to rein them in, some observers pointing out that using sports to advertise such services could be targeting people with gambling problems already, Axie.
And that is never a good thing. Brian Quinn with the business news, thank you very much indeed.
Exactly.
We can cross